A very, very good day to you. I hope you had yourself an amazing Wednesday. It is the 30th of October 2024. One day to the end of October, by the way. The year is coming to an end, 2 months to the end of the year. This is 1903 East African time. This is the Black Hot Fire updates with me, because I'm here to tell you about each and everything that was making headlines in Africa. What was making headlines? Where I have news from all over. I wasn't here yesterday because yesterday was my birthday. It wasn't my birthday, but it was my birthday celebration. So Keith gave me a day off. That is why I was not in the show yesterday. However, I'm back today, and of course, we're going to be looking at each and everything that was making headlines in Africa. We're going to be starting with a cult attack that happened in Uganda that left 8 people dead, including children. 8 people, including a 3-year-old, were killed in a brutal attack by suspected cult members in Uganda, as confirmed on Wednesday, October 30th. Take me back to the other cult that we had in Uganda. We had a Ugandan cult that massacred thousands. This is the cult that I'm talking about.
Years, the people of Kanungu, Uganda, had known Credonia Merinde as a violent bar owner who dabbled as a prostitute. So, it came as a shock to them when she became a devout Catholic, praying for hours on end while claiming the ability to receive messages from the Virgin Mary. Those who knew her thought that she had finally changed her life for the better. Little did they know the worst was yet to come. Credonia and her accomplices managed to murder thousands of the congregants, making her one of the worst mass murderers in the world.
So we're going to be looking at the case of Credonia Mwirinde, who we've had several cults in Africa that have killed, massacred hundreds and thousands. Last year we had the Shakahola massacre in Kenya, led by a certain pastor from there who told people to fast to death. Then there's the Ugandan one. The reason I'm talking about the Ugandan one is because another attack happened, was confirmed today, that some cult members attacked and killed 8 people, including a 3-year-old. That's why you're looking at cult, because he who does not understand history is bound to repeat the same mistakes.
Quick disclaimer: before I begin this story, there has been speculation as to who the mastermind of the cult was. There's a lot of people that believe that Joseph Kibotere was the leader. However, throughout my research, I have reason to believe that Credonia was the one calling the shots. However, irrespective of who the mastermind was, all the leaders of this group were murderous religious fanatics who were equally responsible for destroying thousands of innocent lives. Credonia Murinda was born in 1952. She was described as being charming and intelligent. She was also known for her beauty, with soft skin and flawless complexion. Her voice was described as being gentle and pleasing. Not a lot is known about Credonia's childhood, other than the fact that she had 3 brothers. At some point, she got married to a gentleman by the name of Eric Mazima. Apparently, everyone that knew Credonia knew that she absolutely loved money. In fact, her husband stated that, quote, she was never as happy as when she was making money. When she was in her 20s, Credonia was broke and she needed to make some money. She decided to use her charm and convince Eric to kick out his second wife, sell his land, and use that money to open a bar with her. Her bar business went on, and she dabbled in bartending and prostitution. Now, this is where things started getting a little bit crazy. Credonia was known to have a bit of a violent streak. She particularly had an obsession with fire, often using it as a weapon of choice against her enemies. One example of this is when she had an altercation with a local health official. She got so mad, she burned his household belongings. This obviously freaked out her family, and they believed that she was mentally ill. They made the decision to send her away for treatment. One of Credonia's childhood friends alleges that she once seduced a motorist who was passing through, killed him while he slept, and took his money. Apparently, when customers went to her bar in the morning, they found her washing blood off the concrete. Over the years, police said that stealthy murder became a tool she used to accumulate wealth and to silence her accusers. One particular interesting fact was that all her 3 brothers died off one by one, leaving her to inherit her father's land. They all died through suspected poisoning. In 1989, 10 years after opening for business, her bar went broke. After this happened, she claimed to have seen the Virgin Mary in a cave just outside Kanungu, and she
And I know once she claimed that, people believed and followed her.
converted to Roman Catholicism. This was a new chapter in Credonia's life. She appeared to have changed her life. She was described as being very devout. She spent hours praying, writing, and fasting on a regular basis. She slept without a mattress and never smiled for some reason. She would black out periodically in the middle of conversations with people to receive messages from the Virgin Mary. Having been a bar owner and occasional prostitute in her past, there was some mystery about her, and some of her neighbors compared her to Mary Magdalene in the Bible. Her devotion to religion was inspiring because it showed how religion can completely change your life. Her new reputation helped her enlist the help of two respected local clerics. They were Dominic Kataribabo, who was an excommunicated priest, and Joseph Chibotere, a devout Catholic. Joseph Chibotere was fascinated by visionaries. In fact, he himself had admitted to having a vision in 1984. Credonia approached him and told him that in addition to having a vision of the Virgin Mary close to his house, the Virgin Mary had told her that a man named Joseph Chibotere was going to help her restore the Ten Commandments. Joseph was absolutely elated and flattered that he had an important role to play in the quest for salvation. Together, in 1989, they formed the Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God. Theirs was a religious sect that split from the Roman Catholic Church in Uganda and preached about repentance before the end of the world in the year 2000. Being a respectable man in the community, Joseph's conversion to Marina's beliefs gave the movement instant respectability. At this point, Credonia was living in Joseph's home, which he shared with a couple of other relatives. They all lived in a compound together. Credonia did not get along with any of them. They kind of hated her, and they thought that the two, Joseph and Credonia, were having an affair. The family finally had enough of her antics when she allegedly beat up Joseph's wife and burned some of her stuff. Joseph's family finally kicked her out. In 1991, Joseph followed her and moved into her compound. He became a figurehead of the cult. Credonia transformed Joseph Chibotere into a kind of Christ figure. He wore a Catholic bishop's robe and ring. He alone was allowed to ordain young men into the cult's priesthood. It's been reported that Credonia used him because of his money and because he was a man. Credonia transformed her father's land to the cult's headquarters. They registered the movement as a group whose aim was to obey the Ten Commandments and preach the word of Jesus Christ. Christian icons were prominent in the movement's compound, and the cult had links to Roman Catholicism, with its leadership dominated by a number of former priests and nuns. Asala Komuhangi and Dominic Kataribabo were notable figures in the group. Credonia ran her cult in the late 80s. This was one of the most unstable periods in Uganda's history. Ugandans were reeling from a civil war caused by the ousting of dictator Idi Amin that tore the country apart. In addition to the political turmoil, Uganda was also facing an AIDS crisis. According to ex members of the cult, people sought refuge and comfort in the stability of the group, believing that if they prayed and repented enough, things would get better. The movement grew rapidly, and at its height, membership was estimated as being between 1,000 to 4,000. To outsiders, Joseph Chibotere was the group's leader, but in reality, he was just a figurehead, intended to impose masculine authority over the followers.
In
And
case you're just joining and you're wondering what we're watching, I was putting that today a cult attack has led to the death of 8 people in Uganda, including a 3-year-old. Not the first time that we've had a massacre, a cult massacre in Uganda. We are looking at a different cult massacre that happened many years ago that saw thousands dead. That is the story that we're looking at the moment.
enhance the cult's public relations. Behind closed doors, Credonia was really the one running the show. She was referred to as the programmer. Questions would be sent to her in writing, and she would write back with answers. She was described as being the true power in the movement. According to some senior members, she was the one that chaired their meetings and was the source of the cult's predictions of an apocalypse and the pronouncements that salvation could only be found with the Virgin Mary's messages. The group believed that the world would end at the beginning of the new millennium, so Doomsday was on December 31st, 1999. She claimed that the Virgin Mary had revealed sinister prophecies of famines and wars, with rivers turning to blood and food turning to poison. According to her, their only hope was to repent. The community was self sustaining. They would take in whole families and provide for their every need. The members grew their own food and used their skills to contribute to labor. Devotion to the movement regularly involved pilgrimage to a steep rocky hill nearby. After a tough hike through a eucalyptus forest, the followers would reach a rock that they believed depicted the Virgin Mary. To join the group, followers were expected to sell off their possessions, turn over the money to the church, and live in the compound. When entering the compound, new members would be asked to take off all their clothes and they would be given the cult's uniform to put on. The followers would wear green, while the leaders wore black. Life there was horrible. Their daily routine consisted of being awakened at 3 o'clock every morning, followed by 2 hours of prayers. They fasted 2 days a week, and on the other 5 days, they were fed very little. The hunger was so bad that children were eating whatever insects they would find. When they were caught, they would be punished. The children, who were not allowed to go to school, were infested with disease, but they didn't dare complain. In order to join the sect, followers had sworn absolute poverty, chastity, and obedience. They slept on the floor, washed themselves with coarse laundry soap, and observed strict silence at all times. This led them to occasionally communicate using sign language. They were never allowed to speak to their immediate superiors, much less to the 12 supreme leaders of the movement, a management structure based on the 12 apostles. I'm going to read extracts from interviews conducted on former cult members by various media outlets. Misariho joined the movement with her family when she was 10 years old. Her widowed mother was struggling to raise three children, one of whom suffered from persistent headaches. Credonia's group offered prayer and a sense of belonging. Misariho's family hosted a branch of the church with about 100 members in their compound. This was 2 kilometers outside the town of Rukungiri. She says, quote, life rotated around prayer, although we also farmed. We did everything possible to avoid sin. Sometimes, if you sinned, they would command you to recite the rosary 1,000 times. You had to do it. You would ask your friends and family to help until you had served your punishment. Another former cult member, Mary Kasambi, said, quote, I had sores on my feet, my arms, and my legs, but I didn't care. I believed what I was doing was right. Credonia could say, today we are all going to dig for 1 week, or today we are not going to eat for 3 days, and we wouldn't. Credonia would get a program from heaven, from the Virgin Mary, and she would transmit it to us. Our job was to
I literally have no words.
obey. I don't believe people went to Credonia asking for their money. You didn't ask questions. Kasambi left the cult in 1997 after she saw her four young children foraging for grasshoppers to eat. Investigators say that Credonia apparently played off fear of the devil to persuade her closest aides to commit mass murder. Several former cult members described how she fostered a visceral, overpowering fear of demonic intrusion into the cult. Every object that came from the outside, be it money, clothes, food, or medicine, had to be exorcised with prayer. She said that the devil was everywhere. Credonia was a ruthless leader. It's been reported that she once led followers on a punishment raid of relatives who had refused to join the cult. Several reports indicate that she would use poison as a murder weapon to eliminate those that she considered to be her enemies. The year 2000 was fast approaching. According to the followers of the movement, this was to be the end of the world. To prepare for this event, members sold off their possessions and turned the profits over to the group's leadership. Finally, the day was upon them. December 31st, 1999. Followers waited patiently for Armageddon, but shockingly for them, Nothing happened. It was just a regular day. When the world did not end by January 1st, it is theorized that trouble started brewing in the movement. Members began asking questions and demanded the return of their money and property. There was another theory that there was growing skepticism about Credonia's power and those of the other leaders. Either way, there was a crisis, and the leaders needed to fix it. Shortly after dawn on Friday, March 17th, 2000, 500 people, mostly women and children, had burnt their belongings, showered, clipped their nails, shaved their hair with razors, and put on their green and white uniforms. Credonia summoned them into the church, which they called the Ark. The church was lined with 68 jerry cans filled with gasoline. Cult leaders nailed the doors and windows shut and set the church on fire. No one managed to escape, and all 500 people died an agonizing death. It is believed
500 people were torched to death in March 17th, 2000 by a cult leader in Uganda. Well, sounds stupid, right? And it looks like a long time ago, and we must have learned. I mean, we must have learned from this. We must have learned that uh, extreme extremism in some things, especially in religion, and of course, there are people who always ready to take advantage. There are psychopaths who are always ready to take advantage of the ignorance that we have in Africa. We must have learned something. I mean, we must have learned something, but no, we did not, because years later, around 20 years later, in Kenya, more than 700 others died in a similar situation. Only that these ones did not were not lit on fire. These ones starved, fasted to their death. The Ugandans one was set on fire. Some say they set themselves on fire, but they literally locked down the windows and the doors, and 500 people, including children, most of them women, succumbed on that day.
that Credonia, together with her accomplices, fled the scene. Authorities were alerted to the compound by neighbors complaining of a fire and a horrible smell coming from the direction of the cult's compound. When the authorities arrived, they were met with a horrific scene. The charred remains of approximately 500 people lay at one end of the chapel. Virtually no one could be positively identified. The police theorized that the cult members had committed mass suicide, but that theory was quickly dismissed after officials were drawn by a horrible stench coming from what was believed to be a pit latrine. Police discovered the bodies of 6 large men, partly dissolved in sulfuric acid. 5 of them had been poisoned to death, and one had been killed by a blow to the head. This led authorities to begin investigations into the deaths. They soon found out that the fire was just the beginning. In subsequent days, police found hundreds of bodies buried in mass graves at other properties owned by the cult across southwestern Uganda. 155 bodies were found buried inside Dominic Kataribabu's house and in pit latrines outside. The bodies were cemented under the floors of the house, and maize was planted on the outside graves. The victims, half of them children, had been poisoned. Those who had not died quickly and quietly had been stabbed, strangled, or beaten to death. They lay buried in several mass graves, naked, stripped of all identifying features, and stacked together in pit latrines. With this evidence, police theorized that the 6 men found in the pit latrine in the compound were the executioners that had carried out these massacres.
Joseph Kibwetere's compound is abandoned now to the ghosts of his victims, the 330 people who perished here when they were herded into a church and incinerated. Inside the classrooms are the lists of children who studied here and died here. He told his followers this place would be their ark of salvation and used radio broadcasts to attract converts drawn by his promises of heaven, but only for those faithful to God's commandments.
Various press reports put a police estimate of the overall death toll at around 1,000 to 3,000 victims. This surpasses the mass suicide of 914 people in Jonestown, Guyana in November 1978 by members of the People's Temples Church, led by the deranged leader Jim Jones. During investigations, one question was constantly being asked: where was Credonia Mwerinde? Ugandan authorities believe that Credonia, Dominic Kataribabo, Joseph Chibwatere, and other leaders of the movement left the sect's Kanangu compound in the early hours of March 17th. In April 2000, police offered 2 million Ugandan shillings for any information on their whereabouts. The real death toll was certainly much higher, but the exact figure may never be known. The Ugandan police was ill equipped at handling investigations of that magnitude. Local leaders also faced scrutiny for ignoring illegal practices the cult was involved in. There was an uproar after videos of barefoot prisoners forced to dig up the mass graves surfaced. The local police responded to this backlash by saying that they did not have adequate funding needed to conduct investigations. They also added that providing protective gear to the prisoners was not part of the contract. After this incident, the government of Uganda stated that they would be alert and would monitor some of the cults in the country to prevent a repeat of what happened in Kanungu.
So that was how many years ago? That was in 2000. Well, they promised that they were going to make sure that such a thing never happened again. But yesterday and today, as was reported today, 8 people, including 3-year-old child, were killed in a brutal attack by suspected cult members in Uganda, as confirmed today on October 30th. The assault took place on Tuesday in Mzizi A, a small village in Kagadi district, about 250 kilometers, 150 miles west of Kampala. Kampala is Uganda's capital. According to the Ugandan People Defense Forces, the attackers, believed to be members of a new unidentified cult, targeted relatives and community members using bladed weapons in the attack. Security forces, including police and military units, are actively searching for the perpetrators as investigations continue to uncover the details about the new cult. 8 other people were injured in the incident, with 4 of the deceased under the age of 13. According to police, security forces reportedly killed 2 of the suspected attackers as they responded to the violence. So this is another cult that is coming up in Uganda, and they were ordered. They orchestrated an attack where they attacked. The attacks targeted relatives and community members using bladed weapons in the attack, and as a result, deaths happened. It's a new unidentified cult. But for how long are we going to talk about the religion brainwashing that happens in Africa? That is sometimes too, it looks too childish to be true. If you get what I mean, it looks too childish to actually be factual, because you look at, for example, the 2000 and the 2000 Ugandan cult that we were just looking at. How does someone convince you to attack your relative because they have refused to join a certain religion? You look at the Kenyan Shakahola massacre and you wonder, it looks childish to me to some extent. It's beyond ignorance. It's now a matter of you being stupid, for lack of a better word. It's a matter of you being a fool. It's one thing to be ignorant, but it's one thing to be foolish. How do you get convinced by somebody who enjoys 3 meals a day to fast to your death? You don't eat for a day, you don't eat for the second day, and you do the same with your family and your kids to a point that you die of hunger. It's so bad that when the Kenya Red Cross tried to rescue those ones who had still not died from the fasting, they refused to eat. Doctors had to put food into them using pipes. Food had to be put into their bloodstream direct, because they still refused to eat even after they were rescued, and they said they are adults, they know what they're doing. So sometimes it's beyond ignorance. To me, it's childlike behavior. It's something I would expect a child to do. I actually would not expect a child to not eat for 8-9 days if I told them to. They're gonna look for food. Come on, they are brighter than that. This is the reason why we have people saying that we have the lowest IQs in the world. Such people are the ones that make us look dumb like that. If somebody can convince you to not to fast to your death, I don't know how low your IQ intelligence is. Don't know how low your intelligence quotient is for somebody to convince you not to eat while they are eating to your death. For somebody to convince you, you know what, go sell all your belongings. The world is ending. The world is going to end tomorrow. So the world was apparently to end on 31st December 1999. So go sell all your belongings, bring the money to me. The world is ending, but I need your money so that when the world ends, I'll be having you. Let me keep your money for you just before the world ends. And in all your stupidity, you go sell your belongings and bring the money to somebody. And Jiba Jaba is with me, and he's saying this woman is a psychopath. And he says, what? Thousands, yeah, more than 1,000 people died in that incident. 500 burnt in a church, 500 others, 500 more others were discovered, either buried in pit latrines or buried in classrooms, you know. It's beyond ignorance. It's now a matter of stupidity. I feel like it's childlike behavior. It's something I would expect a child to not even do, but you do it. But we do it every now and then. And as I said, you might think we might have learned from past experiences. I mean, every other every other people learn from, you learn from something that happened in the past. And we say that now we had 1,000 people die in Uganda. Never again will we in Africa die from cults and from being brainwashed by psychopaths, because these are psychopaths who derive the excitement from seeing other people die. We might say we learned, but we never did. Yesterday 8 people were killed by another cult. This one's attacked family, relatives, and community members with blades. Murder date, injured date. The Ugandan one was, by the way, more deaths than even the Jim Jones one, because this one was 1,000 plus. 500 of them being set on fire. The Bible reads, trust no man that predicts the end of the world, Jiba Jaba says. But then I remind you of that person who said, of course, in an offensive way, that if you want to hide something from Africans, put it in a book. It wasn't offensive. It was supposed to undermine us, to put us down. But that's the reality. Not many Africans love to read. Even the believers, the ones who believe deeply in the Bible and the Quran and in Christianity and in Islam and in every other religion, they have not even read the books. They have pastors read the books to them and translate them. They have imams read the Quran to them and translate it. Like, you can't sit down and read for yourself. Mjiba Jaba goes on to say they didn't ask what's your tribe in reference to the Ugandan massacre that saw 1,000 plus people dead, most of them kids. And so you have to feel for the children. They died because of the ignorance and stupidity of their parents. Even in Kenya, the Shakahola massacre happened last year, by the way. Just in case you think it happened a long time ago, it was last year that we had at least 700 people starved to death, fast to death, because they were told, if you fast to death, then all your problems are going to end. So they fasted to death, and the one who told them to fast ate. He actually complained when he was arrested. He complained that they were denying him food in jail. And so I pity, the only people I pity in this situation are the kids, because they end up suffering, dying from the ignorance of their parents. For example, the Shakahola ones, they made their kids not fast to death. I mean, you are a kid, you just want to be fed, but your parent tells you not eating. Why? Because a certain man told us to not eat because we're going to go to heaven if you don't eat, and now we're not eating, the whole family. And of course, the kids will die first, and then the adults later. So you watch your kid die, one after the other. You watch your wife die because you've not eaten for days. You've not eaten for 15, 16 days. You watch your kids die one after the other. You watch your wife die, then you die. because you've been brainwashed to an extent that you cannot think like a sane person. It's the minimum sanity level that you can have, that somebody cannot convince you to take away your own life. I mean, it's one thing to get killed, but it's one thing to kill yourself because somebody told you to not eat to your death. That's insanity, that's stupidity, that's foolishness, that's a display of lack of intelligence. That's not even ignorance. I mean, the most ignorant person in the world, you can go to the most you can go to the most idiotic person in the world and tell them to not eat. They go, listen, a madman, literally a madman, an insane person, a man suffering from mental illness. If you told them to not eat, they would listen to you probably for a day. On the second day, they are going to feel hungry and they are going to eat. And a madman, the ones that we see walking in marketplaces, they would not fast to death. That one I'm sure of. So it's beyond insanity, it's beyond ignorance. I understand how cults work. There's a lot of brainwashing that happens, of course, a lot of conditioning, and of course it's to do with mob psychology and threats and everything. But then it doesn't make sense to me, whichever way I want to look at it. The fact that we can have Njibajaba tells me I'm wrong. I don't know about what. Maybe he can go further and explain. But it doesn't make sense to me in any way that our intelligence has fallen down to these levels, that somebody can come, indoctrinate you into a cult, tell you to do this, don't do this, give you a blade like it happened in Uganda yesterday, and tell you to go kill your relative. Why? Because your relative refused to join this cult, so go kill him. And I go kill him. Jiba Jaba says they find hope outside of themselves. They will take it to the end. I mean, life is messed up in Africa, but it's not that bad. It's not messed up to a point that you're going to fast to death, you're going to starve to death. It's not that messed up. It's messed up, but not that messed up. People live still. People live. It's not that messed up. Like it's not so bad that you have to listen to every idiot that comes and tells you to do this, do that, take a blade, go stab your neighbor because he refused to join this cult. It's idiotic. It's foolishness. It's lack of intelligence, according to me. Just my opinion. I don't see a single explanation that can explain. I mean, it's one thing to find hope outside of yourself. I mean, 80% of Africans are religious. They find hope in religion. They are told that, they find hope in religion. They are told that there is going to be life after heaven, life in heaven, and life in heaven is going to be awesome. There's going to be golden streets that have been made with gold. There's going to be milk and honey. I understand that. I understand finding hope in such, but even those ones, you can't convince them to take their own lives. They know heaven is good. They've been convinced heaven is good, but they don't want to die yet. They know they have been told there's milk and honey in heaven, but they really don't want to go to that heaven yet. So I think these ones do not find hope. They've lost the whole of it, and they are. I don't have a word for people who get indoctrinated into such cults. Like, you can pour gasoline on yourself and set yourself on fire, then you deserve to. You deserve to, really, because how does someone convince you to pour gasoline on yourself and to set yourself on fire? What level of indoctrination takes you there? The one convincing you, by the way, is not doing the same. You saw in the Ugandan massacre, they left the church before it was set on fire. And Jiba Deba tells me it's called conviction. Anyway, job is coming up in the next few minutes. These have been the Black Fire updates. We're looking at a cult attack that happened in Uganda. That's very sad. Killed 8 people, including 4 of them being below 13 years old. So About 4 kids died because some people were stupid enough to be indoctrinated to be given blades to go and kill their relatives and community members because they refused to join the cult. It's a new cult. The government does not even know its name. 20 years after 1,000 people were killed in a church, and others were found in pit latrines after another cult that saw many people die. A year after the Kenyan massacre that saw about 700 people die. We still have the Jim Jones one, and so many other examples of cults that have seen so many Africans die because of getting indoctrinated into stupidity. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the rest of your day. I'll see you tomorrow on the Black on Fire updates. A big shout out to Ikan Fire, who was saying our black women are maintaining colonization and they don't want consciousness. So a big shout out to you, Ikan Fire. Thank you for joining me, Jiba Jaba, and the rest of the family. See you tomorrow. Much love.